everybody. Welcome. You guys have no idea how deep of an honor it is to be sitting next to these incredible, incredible artists. Joe, who couldn't be here today, said he said, here's a great lead-in. I did the math. There's about 275 years of theater, dance, and critical writing represented on stage today. So you can imagine the degree of amazingness that's here. So I'm going to do, I'm going to consult my notepad here and kind of do a brief introduction for everyone here, which is only really hitting the tip of the iceberg on the amount of work that these artists have done. So, Robert Brustein is the former dean of the Yale School of Drama, the founder of the Yale Repertory Theater. When this was actually a church, he made it into a theater. Yeah, it's amazing. He's been a theater critic for The New Republic and the author of 19 books, among them The Theater of Revolt, An Approach to Modern Drama, Revolutions as Theater, Notes on the New Radical Style, and he's written 12 plays, several adaptations, such as Ibsen's The Wild Duck, The Master Builder, and When We Dead Awaken, which was directed by Robert Wilson, as well as Lysistrata, which was directed by André Serban. Mr. Brustein has been inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame and the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and in 2011, President Obama awarded him with the National Medal of the Arts. So yeah! Woo! Amazing. Alvin Epstein is the former artistic director of the Guthrie Theater and former associate director of Yale Repertory Theater. He's performed leading roles in over 100 plays, including works by Pirandello, Shakespeare, Ennui, Shaw, Orton, Chekhov, Brecht, Molière, and the ancient Greeks. Known for his dedication to the works of Samuel Beckett, he created Lucky in the American premiere of Waiting for Godot, and Clove in the American premiere of Endgame. I mean, come on, guys, this is like theater history. He's performed in numerous shows on Broadway and off-Broadway. Some of his roles include The Fool to Orson Welles' King Lear, Peachum in the Threepenny Opera with Sting, and recently Furs in the Classic Stage Company's production of The Cherry Orchard with John Turturro and Diane Wiest. Mr. Epstein has also been seen in feature films and television dramas, has directed plays around the country, and has taught at the American Repertory Theater Institute in Cambridge. Among his numerous awards have been the Obie for Dynamite Tonight, which we were just talking about downstairs, the Obie Lifetime Achievement Award, Brandeis Creative Arts Award, the Elliot Norton Award for Sustained Excellence, the Jason Robards Award for Dedication to the Theater, and this year, the Emerson College Connor Award and Honorary Doctorate from Boston Conservatory. So yeah! Woo! Okay, and Carmen de Lavallade, who if you've not already seen As I Remember It, will soon discover has had an incredible career in dance, theater, film, and television. She began in LA performing with Lester Horton Dance Theater. She appeared in films including Carmen Jones with Dorothy Dandridge and Odds Against Tomorrow with Harry Belafonte. She performed in the Broadway production of House of Flowers with Alvin Ailey starring Pearl Bailey. Her dance career includes having ballets created for her by Lester Horton, Jeffrey Holder, Alvin Ailey, Glenn Tetley, John Butler, and Agnes DeMille. I mean, oh my God. Jesus. She was a principal dancer with the Metropolitan Opera, and she's choreographed for the Dance Theater of Harlem, Phil Danko, the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, and the productions of Porgy and Bess and Die Meistersinger at the Metropolitan Opera. Ms. de Lavallade has also had extensive acting career as a member of the Yale Repertory Theater and the American Repertory Theater, where she also taught, performing in numerous off-Broadway productions. She and her husband, Jeffrey Holder, were the subjects of the film Carmen and Jeffrey, which chronicled their 60-year partnership and artistic legacy. Her most recent theatrical work includes Stepmother by Ruby Dee, Post Black by Regina Taylor, and the Broadway revival of A Streetcar Named Desire. She is a founding member of the dance company Paradigm. Lauded by numerous institutions, Ms. de Lavallade received the Dance Magazine Award, an honorary doctorate from Fine Arts from the Juilliard School, and was named by the Dance Heritage Coalition as one of America's 100 irreplaceable dance treasures. ignoring all of that, when in one moment, as I remember it, Carmen, you mentioned that you received a telegram from Robert Brustein, a telegram which is amazing for me, telegram, inviting you to come to the Yale School of Drama, and this is in fact where you all have collaborated. So I have two opening questions for you guys. How does it feel to be back on this stage in this theater together? And two, can you talk about what brought you here? Like, where does your story begin at Yale as you remember it?
Well, I know where mine began. Started with this person here, because we worked together in, what was the? Crimes. And no, before that, because you did something for me, a voiceover for The Beloved, remember? For a dance piece, and then we did the Story of a Soldier. Right. Yes, for a film.
Yeah, right.
L'Histoire. And that's when we got to, and you knew Jeffrey too, because you worked in, what, 12th Night or something? You were the Zanies or something like that. Yeah. And then I met Bob because of you, because I came to see you in the back eye. And then I met this gentleman, and somehow it just all happened, because it was really that was when I first saw at the main stage. It was like magic, and I was working with Mildred Dunnock at the same time, because she also, I performed with her, John Butler, my choreographer, choreographed a piece for us together, Millie and myself.
I didn't know that.
The Francois Villon poem of the old woman, lament, the old age. Yeah, it was part of a little series that we did for television, and we became very, very good friends. And then I stayed at her home when I came to see the Bacchae, and it just sort of happened, you know? And the next thing you know, all the companies were leaving. My son was in Paris and at boarding school and whatnot, and then I received this wonderful telegram from Bob, and Jeffrey, being the generous person that he is, was, said, go and do it. By the way, this was our anniversary today. Oh, yeah. And so he's very generous. Said, go, because it wasn't that far from New York, and it's been the experience of my life, I tell you. It saved it, not saved it, but it changed everything for me, because the dance world is rather limited in a strange kind of way. It's very close-knit family, and they're very regimented. And when I came here, everybody was having opinions and ideas, and I go, no, you don't do things like that, Oh, let's take this out of the script. You don't do things like that. You wouldn't tell a choreographer to take the steps out. So it was a learning period of just letting go and being a little more relaxed about life. So thank you, Robert.
Thank you, darling.
My buddies. Yes.
Well, this young lady came to us in 1968. And the reason we were so excited to talk to her was, of course, her legend was already large, but also her new interest in acting was attracting me. She felt that she was getting older, and as a result would probably have to give up dancing pretty soon. This was almost 50 years ago. And that she wanted to enter this new discipline known as acting. And I was absolutely delighted to have her in the company and to start her on a series of roles that sometimes combine dancing, singing, acting, and indeed Carmen's presence among us made our company much more musical than it had been in the past, although it started with musicals. But now we were doing a lot of music, and we wanted to see her up on stage moving as well as acting. And she gave us that opportunity in our story theater sequences, directed mostly by Paul Sills. She gave us that opportunity in our Brecht Weil, Seven Deadly Sins, directed by Alvin, as I remember, in which she played the dancing Anna. She gave us that opportunity in the Little Mahogany. Were you in the Little Mahogany? I can't remember that now.
The Big Mahogany.
The Big Mahogany, that's right. One of those size mahogany. Maybe the middle size mahogany.
Yeah.
And she did, I can't remember how many roles, but she got better and better and better and better. And I had the great privilege of directing her on this stage in one of the opening plays we did here, which was a production of Molière's Don Juan, in which we got a chance to absolutely abuse the church, which it had been. We had tried very much to have a rehearsal hall here in the basement, but since the Baptist church then considered theater to be a form of profanity, literally, they would not let us into the basement. So Kingman Brewster had bought this block in order to put up the British Museum next door, and the whole block was going to be devoted to the British Museum. And I got the idea that maybe we could borrow the church for maybe a few years while they were putting up the museum. And I managed to persuade him to do that, and I thought, we've got it. And we managed to put up a few posters and put in these seats and change the nature of the church so that instead of the stained glass windows that they had, with the first production, we did this obscene production of Don Juan, in which he was turned into a saint, or rather a figure in the sainthood area of saints and sinners by Carmen, who was playing a specter that he was pursuing all this time. He was pursuing her, that was Alvin, playing Don Juan, and in the on the stained glass windows, there were statuary of people in various tormented positions. All from the cast, except for one character, namely Don Juan. And at the end of the production, when Don Juan finally catches up with the specter played by my sweet Carmen, she opened her gown to reveal her innards, really, her intestines, and covered him with this and put him onto an altar and rose from the altar with him having turned into one of the statues, and walked off stage in the most exquisite manner, as I will never forget. And that was the blessing of the church. That's how we blessed it. It's been blessed many times after with equally profane productions.
It was a beautiful.
You want to know how I got here?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'll have to dig in a few little places, leaving a lot of space in between.
Yeah.
I'll fill in.
Well, I guess, Bob, were you at the performance of Dynamite Tonight at the Actors Studio?
I was indeed. Can I tell that story? Because I saw it from a different perspective than you. The Actors Studio had done a production of Dynamite Tonight by William Bolcom and Oliver Weinstein. And it was being directed by Mike Nichols. Alvin played in it along with a number of other brilliant actors, Linda Lavin, Gene Trubnik,
Barbara Harris.
George Gaines, Barbara Harris, I beg your pardon, or Barbara Harris. Linda played it later. And it went up. I was invited because I had friends in the cast on the first night. I was the second night critic, otherwise I would have come the second night. On the first night, I saw this splendid production that was absolutely trashed in the New York press the next morning. And as a result, Lee Strasberg, a character who Alvin played in a play by me called Nobody Dies on Friday, closed the production in his extraordinarily courageous way. And I would never have seen it without that. And I was absolutely outraged to see a great work of art coming to a close. So the first thing I did when I came to Yale was to invite Alvin and the entire cast of that play to come to Yale and open our season with it. And indeed, that was Paul Sills who directed it rather than Mike Nichols, who was not available.
Well, Mike was involved later on. I have a different version. We did it at the studio. You got that right. And you invited us to your television show. You did a half-hour show on television.
Called the Opposition Theater on PBS.
The Opposition Theater. And we all showed up for that. That was with, and at the studio, it was Barbara Harris who played Slimpatia.
Right.
But for you, I guess she couldn't do it, and Linda Lavin did.
Correct.
That's when Linda came into it. Then you invited us after the television appearance. Then you invited us to do it at Yale,
In full.
which we did. But it was a really great piece, and beautifully directed by Paul Sills. But it was trashed. But before it got to be trashed, it went into previews. They had decided the Actors Studio had decided to produce it. And Gene Trubnick, it was David Hurst who did it first. Then Gene Trubnick came in. And Gene and I were signed to do other things. So we could not continue to do Dynamite Tonight. We begged the Actors Studio to please wait for us. Don't meddle with something that's really working, that's beautifully directed by Paul Sills. And they wouldn't wait. So they announced the production, they started rehearsing it. I went in to see one of the last rehearsals. It was at the York Theater. Remember that place on First Avenue?
Yeah. That's where I saw it.
They weren't happy with, Paul had agreed to do it again, only if they would let him withdraw if he came to the point where he felt he didn't want to continue. They incredibly agreed to it. And at the end of a certain period during the rehearsal period, Paul decided he didn't want to go on with it. So they had to find another director. And I can't remember who.
Mike Nichols.
Not yet. I think Lee Strasberg was the first one. And he lasted in the directorial chair for about a week or less, I'm not sure. The next one was Mendy Wager.
Oh my gosh.
Michael Wager became the director. And that didn't work out. I don't know who was making the decisions about what worked and what didn't work. Then Mike Nichols came in. And the first thing that Mike did was cut a lot of the music, so this opera for actors turned out to be half a play and not much of an opera. And then they opened and they got trashed. And then they closed, and that's the end of the story.
Not the end.
No, go on.
But, well, the play went on to become our first production. We brought it back in our 10th anniversary year. It went to New York after the first production and had a run there. It's gone into the repertory, and William Bolcom has emerged as one of the, of course, great composers of America, and Arnold Weinstein, I think, was never better, and he was a great playwright, never better than in that production of Dynamite Tonight. So we got a great deal out of it. We got William Bolcom, we got you, we got Arnold, began teaching playwriting and doing plays for us. And we had everything with Carmen in that particular.
Where were you?
Speaking of which, so I'm wondering, one of the other things, like you talked about being interested in Carmen as an actor or that kind of transition. And what I find really interesting in your body of work in pieces as early as Salome or Yerma, there was always narrative kind of involved in dance. Could you talk a little bit about that? Is that what led you to being interested in acting?
Well, in those days, let's say, that dance was always narrative. Everything was a narration. And Lester was interested in plays. That's where I learned about Lorca, and I learned about, you know, the making of Salome and things like that. So that I kind of naturally liked storytelling, and I wasn't that great. Technically, I was good, you know. I mean, but I was not interested so much in the technique. It was really like a tool to say what I want to say. You know, yes, I was good, but I was lacking in a lot of things because there's certain, now today the kids all have these big stretches up here and the legs up here, and you know, I mean, it's just all over the place. Then you didn't have to have that, but I had some physical, I know my knees always up like this. You know, you sit cross and all the legs are supposed to be down. Never happened with me. They were always like this. And Lester would look at me and he said, "What's your knees?" I said, "That's it." And he'd kind of laugh, but that never stopped him from using me. That didn't bother him so much, you know? And it was a very difficult technique. It was very broad and airy and daring, and I love the way but he was very good at storytelling. His Yerma was gorgeous, and the Salome was really terrific and very demanding. And then later on, you know, it was very strange things started to happen because it was a poor company. You know? And when Bella, his main dancer, left, it kind of left him with an emptiness, I think, because she was like his muse and his person that he built everything around. And then he was faced with all these very young people, and he had to start all over again. That was his fourth company. And strangely enough, it was company mixed race. And that in the 1950s, that was rather unusual. But of course, we were dancers. I think everybody ignored us. You know, you were just dancers. You know? Yeah, seriously. And then we were part of the McCarthy period too. And they kind of ignored us in a way. You know, when I came in, I guess I was the first person of color, and then James Truitt came in, and then we had Misai Kawasumi, you know, Lelia Goldoni, and all these different people, which was great, and he had no problem with all that. And he taught us, like I said, everything about the theater. You just didn't go there to dance. You did have to sweep the floor. We had to clean the theater after we finished performing. We had to be there early enough to help. You had to come in and iron your costumes. You had to help make the costume. You had to help make the sets. And all that was learning about what theater was. And you learn the music and sculpture and choreography, and it was so complete so that when you left Lester, you could take care of yourself. He created an atmosphere that was family, and he always told us, there's nothing like healthy jealousy. So we became a family. Nobody was jealous of each other. We just kind of compete in a family kind of way with each other. And Alvin wasn't there when I was there. He came later, actually. We were in high school, and I asked him to come to see the classes, and he stayed. That changed his life, Lester's choreography, and the way that Lester was. And fortunately or unfortunately, he left us a little early. And it was difficult for him. He wasn't well toward the end of his life. And it was a hard life because dealing with 4 companies since 1931 or something, he's been, and LA was not a town for dance or theater. It was a Hollywood place, you know, it's all commercial. And it was difficult. And he had that little theater on 7566 Melrose Avenue, a storefront theater. And a lot of people came there. I mean, Burt Lancaster came. And very interested, Vera Ellen would come to class. And he was known in Hollywood. He would, of course, do some films and whatnot like that. He was a very, very generous man. And he was like a daddy. And next to my daddy, who was kind of a terrific man, Lester was our other daddy. And like Lelia Goldoni didn't have a father, so that was really her daddy. And it was tragic when he left, actually, and it did fall apart because he was special. But I learned everything. I'm still learning from because of that training, that you're not afraid to throw yourself into anything and that you explore things, you're not. And he told me, it was really funny, aside from sending me to a ballet teacher, he said, she can give you what I can't. Now that's a sign of a great mentor. But he told me, he said, there's going to come a time when you just can't just sing or just dance or just act. You're going to have to do everything. He saw that in 1950, he told me that. So that he was really a remarkable man. So that's my base. That's my base in Lelia, and anybody that came out, Alvin, came out of that school. I think I was the luckiest because I was lucky enough to work around Bela Lewitsky. I saw the old company, and I saw the way they worked and their respect for I didn't know what was going on underneath. I didn't know all the disagreements and things that were going on. Because Bela was she was a perfectionist, and she wanted everybody, I guess, to dance like her. She didn't tolerate anybody who could not dance well. It annoyed her. And Lester was always looking for certain things in people, and he would use that personality of the person. He always saw something in somebody. And Bella only saw perfection. And I think that was the big rub. But once I was there, that was like home. I was 7 days a week, really. Like I said, there wasn't very much to do in LA. Yeah, and I was kind of the oddball in school, in junior high and high school, because I would go from East LA, which is a long way up, into Hollywood area, or Daddy would pick me up, and I'd go by myself. It would take me about 45 minutes, an hour to get there. And then I went to City College for 2 years, which was really funny because I was really rather a failure in that, because I was performing every evening. And the teachers knew it. They kind of understood that. And
we should talk a little about how you and Alvin both helped to establish the Brecht-Weill canon in this country, because it wasn't firmly rooted. Before. There was a production of Threepenny Opera in the 30s. It flopped badly.
Oh, yeah.
Then there was a production in New York by Carmen de Lavallade, I think.
I saw
that was successful, and his name began to vibrate. But Alvin and Martha Schlama did this evening of Brecht-Weill songs that really caught the imagination of the country, and it toured a lot. I think it started with us, right? And then it toured a lot. And then as a result of that, we began to do a lot of Brecht-Weill, including The Little Mahogany, The Seven Deadly Sins, which Carmen was so brilliant in, which had a dancing on it and a singing on it. And then Happy End, which Lileana did not allow anyone to perform because she thought it was not written by Brecht. It was written by someone named Brecht under a pseudonym of Dorothy Lane. And there was some question about its authorship. It had great songs by Kurt Weill, her husband. So I tried to persuade her that Michael Feingold, who was at the school at the time, could do a marvelous job of doing an adaptation of this. And he did. We sent it to her. She agreed to let us do it. And as a result, we had this extraordinary production, which Meryl Streep was in, actually. She was still a student at the school. And in her last year, and she and Christopher Lloyd played the leads. You directed Michael Feingold's performance. You were in it.
Was I in that? I was in The Big Mahogany.
The Big Mahogany.
Yeah.
And it went to New York with Meryl and Christopher Lloyd, and it was quite successful there, and established Meryl's reputation very quickly in New York.
Big history.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm wondering about too is, you talk about how Lester Horton was a huge influence in you and kind of your base. And I'm wondering, when you invited Carmen to kind of teach actors movement, or when you were working with actors, did that inform your ideology of how to incorporate dance into theater? And how did that work with you guys as a collaborator? Like, what was that?
Carmen's presence did a lot for this place. Mm-hmm. First of all, it helped increase the number of African-American students and faculty members here. Just her presence did this. And secondly, it made dance a very important aspect of our curriculum, which it hadn't been before. And the movement, movement was always important, but Carmen made it, transcendent. She gave you not just ballet or dance, but she showed how acting really extended into movement as well. And that was irreplaceable and absolutely irresistible for most of our students.
Well, when I worked with the actors, I never worked with actors before about movement because it was always with dancers, but I know, and I decided that no point in making do dance steps because they just because they are expected to do like a dancer, and I said no. But I always say there's a different, dancers are kind of like music and poetry. It's kind of ethereal and it's here and gone. Once you, it's kind of like the aroma of, and I always thought of actors as like the earth. They're like the meat and potatoes. They're on their feet or on the ground, and that they should use their bodies as people because they're going to be working in productions. And even if they dance, they have to dance like a real person. They have to. If you're going to ballroom dance, you're not. You just ballroom dance. But I was interested in that they get acquainted with what they have, and whatever they have is who you are, and use that as much as you can. And what I got fascinated with is the imagination of actors. That was great fun because then it started to I was learning at the same time because the freedom that they had, and they were fearless and imaginative. Dancers, on the other hand, you're told what to do. Although I was lucky in the choreographers that I worked with, they were more like Lester in a way, but you still had to be perfect on, the leg and the this and all that kind of stuff. Gosh. And, but they were so imaginative, and it was really and boy, were they good. There were times where I did a class, and I thought, I'll use Romeo and Juliet. And I said, the bedroom scene. And I said, what would you, without saying words, what would you do? What would the movement be? I never saw anything so beautiful. I remember one couple, the guy was leaning against the wall, and all he did is have his head this way, and she's looking at him, and he just slid down the wall. The whole time she just kept looking at him. It was the most beautiful thing. And then I did another thing of Mice and Men with the two men. Oh my goodness, with their arms around each other, running and scurrying and holding. It was just gorgeous. And I thought, wow, you couldn't get a dancer to do that. And yet it was movement, but it was acting. It just had a different feel. So when we were working on Midsummer Night's Dream, that was fun with the fairies, and they were these gnarly, it wasn't those little ditzy things. With the children, which is all right. But Alvin had this, everything was brawling. Everybody was brawling, and the fairies were all kind of like, they looked like little worms and things. It was really good. And they were mainly men. And it was really fun because you got a lot of movement out of that. It was just wonderful to work with them. And the actors and Marilyn, all of them, so it became, and so they were thinking it not as dancing, but as being a person moving, and then the music takes you there, and you don't change it just because the music, it doesn't get dancing. It's like people, just a lovely transition, and we all, and we have wonderful relationship together with the actors. We got to know each other very well, and you just give them anything to do, and their minds would go, and that helped me, I cannot tell you. Get rid of some of that, as far as dancing, that militaristic way of doing things. I have to do it a certain way, and I just relax and break. I still fight that now, because I get into my dancerisms. Everything has to be perfect now, because you have to work very fast, and it has to be when you're on the stage, because everybody's looking at your foot's pointing, and I feel sorry for ballet dancers. 32 a fouette, and the audience is counting.
But the culmination of Carmen's career at Yale had to be Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah.
Again, directed by Alvin. Where she played this absolutely sinuous, virtually naked Titania, lying on the stage and behind her this huge scoop down which Christopher Lloyd, as Oberon, sinuously crept towards his victim there. And she did this with Alvin's direction, with the full score of the Fairy Queen and a full chorus. Once, and then later in the final, I think the final penultimate year of our being there here at Yale, twice. And then when we went to Harvard and started the ART, the third time, we opened the ART with this production of Midsummer Night's Dream.
The Walnut Theater.
Where?
Walnut Theater?
No, it was at
The Wilbur.
The Wilbur.
The Wilbur.
Yeah.
Well, we did it at the Wilbur. We also did it at the ART.
Yeah,
We did it at the
right.
Loeb. We did
Yeah.
it both places.
Right.
there were 4 productions.
Yeah. Wow.
So there were 4, but that was the same production.
Yeah,
Yeah,
4 versions of the same thing.
exactly. And it was, I wish you could have been there. Maybe some of you did see it, but it was one of the most exquisite experiences of all of our artistic lives. Always be remembered.
Well, that music, oh goodness,
Yeah,
heavenly.
transcendent.
Marcel was
All right, I have a confession,
Yes.
Okay.
which will affect both you and you. I was part of the Yale Repertory Theater by that time. I don't remember dates and how many years passed by, but I know that I knew Carmen. I had known Jeffrey. Jeffrey was a friend, and through Jeffrey I met Carmen. And then our friendship developed. And then one day, Bob Brustein, who was casting the next season, told me that he was casting Carmen de Lavallade to play the female lead in Crimes and Crimes by Strindberg. And I was going to play the male lead. And I thought, he's out of his mind. She's a dancer. She's not an actress. And what is he saddling me with?
I don't blame
I
you.
mean, that's my friend Carmen. She's a dancer, not an actress. Well, I was wrong. And I found that out pretty quickly, because Crimes and Crimes worked.
Yeah,
And-
well, you
and
helped
we-
me a
we were
lot
good
here.
together.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I was frightened out of my bird. Oh, gosh. But no, it was a real experience. I mean, yeah, it was hard.
Well, I know that Carmen kept on learning that. I mean, because I could see you really blossoming as an actress, not as an ex-dancer.
Yeah. Well, that was the best thing being here, because in New York, dancer, no
Yeah.
matter what I do, dancer. Here, not everybody knew who I was, and I loved it, because that way I can take the chances. And I wasn't worried about somebody saying, oh, it's kind of a dancer, and oh, looking at you as a dancer, no matter what you do, it's, oh, she's a dancer, she's a dancer. And that was the freedom that I had here. I thought was really valuable.
Here we weren't stuck in disciplines either. I mean, if you
Yeah,
were
it's true.
an actor, you might become a director, as Alvin did. If you were a dancer, you would become an actor, as Carmen did. If you were a secretary, as Remo Araldi, I don't know if you know that name, he's a great actor, was my secretary up in the ART, and I could tell he was an actor. We put him on stage, and he was an actor from that point since, still is. So nobody is enclosed by a particular discipline. If you're an artist, you're an artist, and you ought to be able to try a lot of things.
That seems to be one of the themes that also is in your work, the courage to take risks, right? And it
That's
seems
what
like
John said.
this theater, and particularly during the 60s and 70s, was all about that, was all about experimentation, about kind of moving beyond limited ideas of what things could be. And it seems like it was full of that kind of combination of dancing with music and theater and everybody. Joe talks a little bit about how you collaborated with making a piece with him, a movement piece that he was terrified.
The banquet
and
years.
you guys said, do it on the main stage, which is amazing. You know, that kind of freedom. Can you talk a little bit about that
It was
spirit,
that
or-
summer, I think. Were you all away, banquet years?
Banquet
No, I
years,
don't-
right?
You were there, you saw the banquet years? Yes, it was about what
and
happened
Joe.
in, yeah.
You and Joe
Me and
Grapazzi.
Joe, well, all of us kind of
Yeah.
cooperated. I think if people were left here in the summer and didn't have anything to do. And we put this crazy piece together. It was called The Banquet Years, and it was based on a book, and I can't remember the author's name, but it was about the turn of the century when, after Victor Hugo died, then everything, sprouted out, the Jarry and Debussy and all those people, So we made a lovely piece about that, and it was mainly movement, and the actors, there was no dialogue. And I did the songs abilities, and we did all the little, I don't know, it was a wonderful
What
thing, but it was all movement. And
the
we
number that you
choreographed.
did with Joe.
We did
Grapazzi,
Jarry, we did
the Prince and the Butterflies.
Oh, yes, that was
Yeah.
part of it, The Prince and the Butterfly. And I found this piece that Anna Pavlova danced, Glow Little Glowworm, remember that old thing?
Yeah.
Well, it was a big piece. It was called Gavat Pavlova. We only know Glow Little Glowworm. It was a big piece. And I decided, why don't we just do something like a ballet, like I'm Taglioni, and he's going to be after this big butterfly. It was a comedy. And we were serious, though. We really did a ballet. And I asked it was the Connecticut Ballet Company. I asked the director to come in and just help us with partnering, a little thing. And he said, who choreographed this? I said, we did. And he was amazed. But we really did. I did a little tutu, a little long tutu. And Joe Grapazzi was dressed like Blue Boy. In blue with a blonde wig and a, butterfly net?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And he did partner work. He really straight armed me and all that. And he said he'd never forget that. His fingers were killing him. He had no idea. But it was so imaginative when we did the Bal Masque by, I forgot the composer's name.
Satie?
No, it wasn't Satie. It was, I'll think of it in a minute. And we used the costumes here. We all went and picked our costumes out of the costume shop, and we had Jeremy Geit's masks, and that's when we had the double level, I think. And it was a wild piece, but it was quite a wonderful experience, and the actors got a lot out of it. I can't remember, one of the actors came, he said, you really have to be on the stage 100% when you're moving, huh? He said, you can't cheat. You can't. Not when you have movement. But it wasn't like being a ballet dancer or anything like that. And we were all inventing the movement ourselves. And I always, even in Midsummer, I just give a suggestion and I let them take over so that it comes out of their body and not me putting something on you. When I was choreographing at the Met, and I was trying to do it to the dancers who were in the corps, and I remember one young man got so upset and angry, and I just said, well, just invent something. He says, just tell me what to do, and I'll do it. No, that's how terrified they are of going away from, and at the Met, I was always saying, loosen it up a little bit, I don't want you to, and they had a hard time doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't want it to look like, especially in what is it, the Meistersinger. Got the director's name, and he said, I don't want to see anybody's leg out like that. I said, fine with me. So we loosened it up, and they got used to it, and they kind of liked it, but there are some who just won't. They just hold on. They're terrified if you ask them to invent something.
You're talking about the difference between artists, genuine artists, and people who are professionals but frozen in their careers that are afraid of losing them. And the genuine artists want to dare. They want to try, they want to expand, they want to change, they want to transform. And in fact, in a resident company, such as we were lucky to have here, and a brilliant one, it's essential to transform or the audience gets tired of you. So you have to characterize, be someone different from one play to the other, or people will get bored with you, which is just the opposite of movies. Most movie stars who have to be the same so they can be recognized. And the reason why Meryl Streep, I think, is so successful in the movies is that she is a transforming actress. That she is, unlike most of them, she changes from role to role, unrecognizably. And that's what you do when you work in a company. You have to.
Well, working with John Butler, I must say, because we went to Spoleto, the very beginning of Spoleto with Menotti Festival, and I know there's one with Alexander Calder made sets for us. You know, you're around all those kind of artists, and Sir John Gielgud had his Ages of Man there. Colleen Dewhurst was there. I mean, it was wild. And then there was one season, Ezra Pound was there because John choreographed his music from the Testament. And Mr. Pound came to Spoleto, you know, and that was really fascinating. And I was in this production, to make a long story short. He ended up coming to rehearsals in the afternoon, so he'd sit there and watch the rehearsal. And of course, he was famous for not saying anything to anybody, you know, and everybody used to take bets who was going to make him talk. Really. And I remember we were sitting at some party, and Mr. Pound was here, and John was sitting on the other side, and this people were saying, Mr. Pound this, Mr. Pound, and they were trying to make him say something. And he leaned over to John and said, "It's a waste."
What?
Excuse me, it's a waste. And he spoke to us in little bits and pieces. And I had some daring thing to do in the ballet, and I remember him going up to John and said, "You mustn't hurt her, you know." And then after the performance, he sends me this big bouquet of flowers. I have this incomparable Carmen de Lavallade from Ezra Pound. I couldn't believe it. And he shook my hand, and he said, "It'd be nice to see you in something pretty sometime." and his first time he arrived at Spoleto, but this is all learning, you know, you learn about people. And of course, this all going like this, and they said, "Oh, Mr. Pound's going to say something, you know, it's going to read his poetry," and we all ran to the Calle Melissa, this tiny, beautiful little jewel box of a theater. And all rehearsals stopped, everything stopped in Spoleto, and we're all there and sitting there. And there's Mr. Pound, and he's sitting there like this. He says, ready to speak, and he goes, we didn't hear a word he said. But that was another, because of the artists that were there in the opera, and Thomas Shippers was conducting at that time, and Giancarlo was always producing things, and the artists, they had the actors there, and it was really beautiful, and all the extraordinary artists that were there. So I learned a lot there too, you see. But we were around, and John was around people like that all the time. He knew everybody from the arts. This man from Greenwood, Mississippi, and his two leading ladies are Mary Hinkson and myself, two ladies of color. Wow. He had no problem, and he was such a gentleman. He's lovely. And he's the one that said, you have the courage to take the risk. That's what an artist is all about. And that was his way, you know, and he gave you the freedom to interpret because he was a storyteller. And that's why the portrait of Billy is so beautiful, because it's a story. It's not abstract. All of a sudden, dance becomes so abstract. I don't know, you know, you could change the music and just, it's like everybody's doing the same thing. I'm not that pleased about dance now, because it's not a story, but that's my opinion. But all of those things made a difference. When I came here, you know, I brought that with me, and it'd be a part, because it was doing. You had a theater of doing, not just going to the class and doing a thing, getting your degree and going out and trying to find a job, because and it was very much, in a way, a bigger version of Lester's play, because you were really in there doing the work. And that's
Carmen, you would not have made a good Raquette.
I'm afraid not. No, I'm a failure in a corps. I really am a failure in a corps. I can't do that's hard. It's hard.
I have a mill. Oh, go ahead.
One thing about Carmen's Titania, which was really very beautiful. And I gave you very good opportunities to be very beautiful.
Yes, you did.
Using that scenery.
Yes, indeed.
The way you adapted to the slope of the big scoop.
That's because of...
And then your courage in sliding down that thing. you had to do it first because then you were followed by all the others who came tumbling on top of you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you know
but-
why? Because of the Salome. Because when I did the Salome,
Yeah.
I had like these levels when I talk about it, but you have no idea. It was the level that comes up like this, there's another thing here, there's another level here, there's 2 levels there, and it was rarely on the floor. And we had to learn that set with our eyes closed, so we couldn't step on it. And I would have to do very daring things. I remember there was, to tell you, taking courage. I'm standing on something this high, and Lester says, take a hinge and arch your back onto the next level, and then roll down and arch your back, and just doing all kinds of strange things on that set without even having to look. So when I got on this, and he taught us how to be in that environment. So when I got on this set, I did the thing, oh, okay, oh, that's that high, okay, it's here, how do I do this? Okay, I have this to go down, I did. So I had it all worked out.
And there was that space between you and Chris Lloyd reaching for each other.
Yeah, in 2
Across the
different,
gap.
yes. Yes, on a doweling, so you're just hanging on the end like that,
right.
but then the slope is this way. And that was all because of that training.
Well, it was seen, it was appreciated. And what I want to tell you about it, do you remember Walter Kerr, the critic for the New York Herald Tribune? You certainly do.
Yes. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Well, he came to see Midsummer Night's Dream and to review it. And the headline of his review was, "The Word Made Flesh." He was talking about her.
It was fun. No, and Christopher, he was the best partner. And I loved him because there was the most beautiful body, if you remember. Gorgeous, like Michelangelo had. I mean, the proportions were just extraordinary. And fearless. And he was very generous. And one day he came up and he said, "Get on my shoulder." I said, "You're kidding." No, get on my shoulder. And he did his whole last soliloquy with me on his shoulder. And he would rehearse with me on his shoulder. And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I have to breathe and I have to get you." It was just wonderful. And we were just the right height, and it worked out. And I liked it because there was that beauty in the body and a little awkward. And against the Titania, the daintiness. And then I was kind of acrobatic because I was sliding around him and up and around, and that made it a lot of fun. And I thought that was right for Titania. She wasn't something. She was a spirit, and that was really exciting. And it was his generosity that made a lot of that. He invented a lot of those wonderful, naughty things.
There's a little in one of the programs of the Rep that we were looking at in the green room before. There's one little reproduction of your silhouette.
Yes.
On Chris's shoulder.
Right. It was a beautiful very generous actor. Just terrific.
I'd love to switch gears now. I mean, there's a million questions we could ask, but I'd love to give you guys the opportunity to ask everyone questions. So this is being recorded, so we'll pass the mic around. If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you. You have a question over here.
Hi. Carmen, I was interested in reading your bio. You talked about Lena Horne, and I wonder if you could expand a little bit on your relationship with her.
Well, Lena, that's when she was doing all those films at that time, and it just coincided with my debut, and she sponsored my debut, which was very generous of her. And I remember she was going to Las Vegas at that time. She was playing Las Vegas. And Lester, to thank her, it was around Christmas time, he made this great cornucopia of fruit. And it was just a beautiful gift for her, and we went to her home. And she was very very gracious, and there was a whole trunk of books. And she was taking them with her to read, because in Vegas at that time, you could not, you can play there, but you couldn't use the swimming pool. And I didn't see her very much. She was a very busy lady, needless to say, but over the years, we were always friends. And I saw her, I had the privilege of directing an evening in honor of her at the Lincoln Center. And it was her last time she sang. And it was just absolutely a knockout. But she was ailing at the time and getting a little frail, still gorgeous. But it wasn't that we were always together, but we were together. There was a closeness. I was so fortunate to have had the privilege of knowing her. She was a wonderful woman.
Do you have another question? Okay, let's see. Oh, one right there.
Carmen, I'd like to know, I thought I heard you say that you worked with Christopher Walken.
Yes, it was when we did Caligula.
Up here.
Up here, yeah, I remember on the stage. Yeah, well, Christopher is Christopher, what can I tell you? He was quite a character, I remember. Do you remember?
Yeah, I directed it.
Yeah, of course. Right. Christopher was Christopher.
He was great.
He was wonderful in it.
And he was
eerie.
so right for that part.
He was.
And what happened was that we started rehearsals not with Chris, but with Frank Langella.
Oh, I think you're right.
No, you're thinking of another production.
No, Caligula.
You sure?
Was it?
Frank Langella was
No, it was a
play
production in which he
Caligula.
didn't like. No, it was a production in which he didn't like the translation. But this Caligula was by Camus, so it was another. I'll think of it, but it wasn't.
You better think of it because I'm telling
I'll look it up.
you. Look it up. You got
Okay, I got
the book.
my book
The
there.
book. Go to the book.
Okay, well, you got it. What's your story?
Frank Langella came to the first rehearsal and found out at the end of the rehearsal that we would be rehearsing the next day for 5 hours because it was a repertory company and we were performing all the time.
That's right.
So that the rehearsal could not go beyond, let's say, 6 o'clock. And they couldn't, people couldn't come to rehearsal early because they had classes. So Frank walked.
On the first day of rehearsal.
On the
Claimed
first,
that he had not been consulted about the translation.
what?
He claimed he had not been consulted about the translation. We learned of Walken's availability and interest and cast him immediately. You are absolutely right.
Did we have another
That's
question?
one for me.
Oh, we have a question up here. Oh, we've got one up there, and then we'll come down. Yep.
Hello, Ms. de Lavallade. You mentioned un botto mascata, and I wondered if you had any connection with Miss Marian Anderson, or if she inspired you or influenced you in any way, or if you had any contact with her.
No, I don't. I've lost contact with a lot of people. I'm afraid I've been in so many different places and going so many different ways, and I've lost contact. If you have any way of getting, I certainly would like to know. I'm sorry, I don't. It's been a long time.
We take the question down here, and then we'll come down to you. Yep.
Carmen, could you talk about your when you did The Tempest as Ariel? I think it was 75 or 76.
Oh, The Tempest?
And I remember that they were busing in people from New York City. At least that's what I remember anyway.
Oh, was that the frogs?
No, it was here, I believe.
The Tempest? Oh, golly.
December of what year?
What?
Yeah, no, Tempest. You remember The Tempest?
Yeah,
Well, he directed it.
Sure. and
With the Purcell music.
yeah, and you
Yeah, Ariel.
You played Ariel,
A
right?
lot of aerials.
We had
Then
5
you-
areas.
It was five, was it 5 aerials?
Yeah.
And I break apart. I was the main, yeah, it was really, and I remember I was on the top at the very end and it came out of the cocoon.
Yeah, that's right,
that's right.
You emerged from a
Cocoon and flew away.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it was lovely. No, it was really, really great. There was a great cast. It was a great cast, but I do remember we were like 5 aerials and it was really quite interesting.
But Alvin, weren't you playing Prospero?
Were you playing
Yes.
Prospero?
How could you direct it and play Prospero?
I did.
You did. And I let you.
You let me.
We've got a question here.
Well, you mentioned a swimming pool before. With the frogs, this is both for Carmen and Bob, it did get mixed, and Alvin, it did get mixed reviews. Is there anything what are your thoughts on it now, and is there anything you would have done differently?
Actually, the Frogs did not get mixed reviews. They got very strong reviews, which I resented. For the first time in my life, I resented the reviews. The Frogs was meant to be a lark. I had met Larry Gelbart, who I admired enormously for a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. I met him in London when I was on leave there. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to get him to do a version of the Frogs as he'd done a version of this other Plautus play in a funny thing that happened on the way to the Forum. And he agreed to do it. And I thought, we'll do this after the season. It'll have a 2-week run. It'll be a lark for the company. And we'll do it in a swimming pool at Yale, because the Frogs could be the Yale swimming team. And I think he'd originally had that idea. I don't know if I invented it or he did, but that's the way we did it. Unfortunately, the swimming pool had terrible acoustics. And George Eisenhower, the great theater engineer at Yale, managed to work on these acoustics for a long time in order to make them work. But it turned out that Larry was not just satisfied with doing the play, he wanted some music. And who did he want? He wanted Stephen Sondheim. And I was a great admirer of Stephen Sondheim, but this was getting out of my control. I mean, this was turning into something large and pre-Broadway, which we were very strongly against and had endured a lot of sacrifices in order to remain strongly against becoming a tryout house for Broadway. But I didn't want to disappoint Larry, so Steve came up, and he wanted his Jonathan Alter, who was his arranger. So he came. Then he wanted an orchestra of, I think, 8 or 10. So they came. And this budget was absolutely blossoming out of control. We did it. All the critics came up from New York, and including Lenny Bernstein. And it was generally adored, but I didn't adore it. And in fact, I upset Sondheim at one point by not being sufficiently enthusiastic about his work, and he never quite forgave me for it. In fact, he didn't forgive me for it. Still remembers it. But it was done again in New York by Nathan Lane not too long ago. That got bad reviews, but that was the better production. It was a very good production. I gave it a good review.
We have another question in the back there.
Pool at that time
Oh,
was a very special pool. I mean, that's what the swimmers, they used to come from all over to have swimming at that pool. And so it was a very special place. And I remember seeing that production, and it was really a lot of fun. It was fun. It was not
Carmen was in it.
Oh, yeah, and Alvin, too.
Alvin was in it.
He filmed
Larry,
But I fell in the pool, right? I was walking backwards and fell in the pool. And Larry Blyden
Larry
played.
Blyden was in it.
Yes, yeah.
Meryl Streep was in it.
Yeah, she was singing.
Yeah, she was singing. Larry Blyden was the lead, and he died soon after, tragically.
He was in an
In
automobile
an
crash.
automobile
In
crash in the
Mexico.
mountains
In Mexico.
In Mexico, right. But it was a wonderful cast. Joe Grafassi was in it, I think, too.
Everybody was in it.
Everybody was in it. Christopher Durang was in it.
It was a lark.
I wasn't in it.
You weren't.
Yes.
Well, it definitely is a privilege to be able to talk to all of you. My question for Ms. de Lavallade is this. You obviously are a very talented woman in many different fields. What advice would you give to someone who is torn between many passions?
Fulfill all of them. Gee. Yeah. That's trying to discover, I mean, if you have a lot of passions. Gee, was that?
What was the question?
Would you repeat that question again, Diane? A little louder, so Mr.
You obviously are someone who's very talented in many different fields. What advice would you give to someone if they're torn between passions, different passions that they have pursuing in their life?
And these are passions in the arts, like writing, acting, directing, or, okay, yeah.
Whew. I
don't think Carmen was torn.
No, I think they're all the same thing.
Yeah, and she melded them together rather than being...
They're not separate. I mean, one helps the other. One might come up a little stronger than the other. You might discover later, I think those things have to find themselves. These passions have to decide who's going to be the stronger, but they help each other, if that makes any sense. That's a hard one.
But it seems like you guys have all acted or directed or performed and written. Like, it didn't seem like one was more valuable than the other, but that rather by participating, by
They're
participating.
companions. They're companions.
Right.
You need them all.
But you can be a pain in the ass. Because, I write plays and then I want to cast them. I want to choose the director. I want to choose the designers. I want to make a lot of fuss. I want to produce it as well as write it and virtually direct it. And I want to, even act in it if I can. So you become kind of, what seems universal is really just very self-absorbed, selfish, and desiring of doing everything.
We have time for about 2 more questions. Does anybody have? We've got one down here and one over here. Yes. We've got a mic coming towards you.
Talking about risk, Ms. Brustein, did you think it was a risk to invite the Living Theater here? And what happened after that? And what happened to that whole movement?
Very good question. It didn't happen in this theater, it happened in the University Theater. And the Living Theater, I had been a critic in New York for the New Republic before I came here. And I was a great admirer of the Living Theater when they were in the Village. And they were doing things like William Carlos Williams, they were doing Pirandello. I mean, they were introducing me to views of playwrights and of performances that I'd never seen before. And I was a great admirer of theirs. And something like The Connection by Jack Gilbert became a part of theater history because they put it on. It was a play about junkies sitting around getting stoned. That was all it was about, really. And they mingled with the audience during the intermission. It was very real. You could not see Pirandelli, and you couldn't see the disconnection between the stage and the theater and the audience. And it was badly panned by all the New York critics and the off-Broadway critics. The Voice, The Nation, the New Republic, they kept it alive. And it became actually a very important part of American theater history. So I was with them. And then they got arrested. Their theater was closed for non-payment of taxes. They wouldn't pay taxes. They didn't believe in giving the government their money. A lot of people think that, mostly Republicans think that. And as a result, they locked the theater, and Julian and Judith, Julian Beck and Judith Molina, who were husband and wife and who ran the theater, broke the locks one night. We're going to stage a forbidden performance in the in the theater, and they were arrested. And they went to trial. And they had very friendly witnesses, including myself and Jules Pfeiffer and a number of others like us. And they had a friendly judge. He was eager to just let them off. Go somewhere. Don't bother me. But they insisted on insulting the judge, cruel judge. Judith insisted on interrogating Julian about her menstrual periods, wearing a black robe. And the whole thing was, so he finally had to say, had to give him some time in jail because they were being very unpleasant. So they spent about 3 nights in jail. But as a result of this, they moved the entire company over to Europe, where they became totally radicalized, total anarchists. And wherever they went invited to put on a play, they occupied the theater. They took over the theater where they were invited, which was not responding to hospitality.
Wasn't there a show called Paradise Now?
One of them was called that. They had 3 shows.
Yeah.
And when I heard they were coming back, I invited them to Yale. In one of my weaker moments. And they came and they put on 3 shows. And it was a sensation in New Haven. Every student at Yale and surrounding areas wanted to see this play. So that was one of the problems, that there were too many people wanting to see the play, and the police were there to make sure that not too many people came into the theater and broke the fire laws. So they were doing Antigone, they were doing Paradise Now, and they were doing one other, which I can't remember. No, it wasn't The Brig. They did that in New York. Frankenstein. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Those 3, and some of them were quite powerful. Paradise Now was the one which was supposed to get the audience to rise up against their arrogant government and knock it down and take over and heal poverty and do everything right. And that was also the one that was attracting most people, because that was the one in which they were not naked, but they were almost naked. And they had a group grope on stage, in which they kind of just groped each other. And it was a real simulation of sex. It wasn't sex at all. Until it went to Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, where Judith Bellina was raped doing this. Very, very awful moment. And her response was, I wouldn't have minded if he'd done it with love. But how do you rape with love? I mean, that's... Anyway. The values were all skewed. And this Prometheus, they were saying the first thing they did when they came into the theater was, I'm not allowed to smoke marijuana. I'm not allowed to take my clothes off. I'm not allowed to do all these things that they immediately began to do. And in fact, Richard Scheckner, who was here at the time, also began to do them, showing that this was all a bunch of hooey, that you could do this. It was against the law, but no one was really going to hold you accountable. What they were held accountable for was trying to open the doors to let these mobs in that would have closed down the theater for fire laws. And at the end of it, they ran into the streets, not naked, but wearing loincloths, yelling, the theater belongs to the people, the theater belongs to the people, the city belongs to the people, the university belongs to the people, and they were arrested for indecent exposure. Once again, a trial, which they got off pretty quickly. But this was the living theater, and it reflected kind of the split in society that hit us in the late 60s, early 70s. And it was over the Vietnam War, and it was a genuine problem because, the war was killing a lot of our young people, and this country was very racist, and continues to be. They were making an effort to put an end to this, but there were a number of ways to do it, and one was actually futile, because it worked against the real effort to do it so that it would last. And they stayed alive. Julian died some years ago. He was appearing in movies at the time. Judith, we did a symposium, all 3 of us, and in the middle of the symposium, members of the Living Theater got up and began taking women's pocketbooks, emptying them and throwing them on the floor. and taking their clothes off again. And, just being generally anarchistic and I thought quite amusing, fun. But a lot of people were quite insulted by it. And it really didn't accomplish anything. Their great gift was theatrical. It wasn't mental, intellectual at all.
And
Do we have?
they all went to the New Haven jail, where you and Norma went to see them.
Yes.
And
We brought blankets.
you brought blankets.
Yes.
Because they were cold.
That's right. We came to get our blankets, and they said the blankets belong to the people.
They did. Because you went back the next day when they were released, and you went back with Norma to get the blankets back, and they had cut them all into serapes. And I remember that they were because Norma was protesting all her blankets were now cut up into pieces, and they were yelling at her. Private property is private property, something like that.
That's right, private property.
Yeah. And so Norma yelled back at them, robbery is no.
Oh, no, that's right. Robbery is theft.
Robbery is
Property is theft.
Property is theft.
And she says, so is theft is theft too. She said.
Yeah, right.
She was very witty.
We got time for one more question. Anybody? Yes.
That's a good memory.
Ms. de Lavallade,
Yeah.
I recently read an article about you in the New York Times. You look surprised. At any rate, and they mentioned that you were living or had been living, I don't know if you're still living, on the Upper West Side. And there were a few photographs of your apartment with your husband, Jeffrey Holder's paintings, I believe.
Yes.
I wasn't aware of him as a painter. Is there anything you could comment on about living with him as an artist, a painter, a dancer, a choreographer?
Well, he's been painting since he was 15 years old. He was a Guggenheim Fellowship. He had a Guggenheim Fellowship for his painting. And when I met him, he was already, actually had an exhibit at that time at the Baron Gallery when I met him. And not many people know it, but he is an artist. If it wasn't the theater, he couldn't decide, talk about passions, whether it was painting or the theater or dance or anything, but he's one of those that did them all. And he's never stopped. Jeffrey's like a child in kindergarten. Anything he put his hands on, this is not just something. He'll make it into something, put it as a beard or a hat or something like that. He always saw things differently, and very, very imaginative. And I suppose living with Jeffrey was like, I don't know, you didn't know what was going to happen the next day. Honest to goodness, I can leave the house one way, I'm going to arrange it this way, come back, it's all different. He brings in paintings, he liked to collect sculpture and art of other people. And even toward his latter days in the homes, he started a whole other way of handling his art because he didn't have his paints. So one day I came in and he'd torn up paper and anything he could get his hand and made these collages, these extraordinary collages. And then one day he came and pulled a carton, box, and tore the corrugated and made corrugated designs on it. And I kept bringing things home, and he was at the actor's home, and it was like a Beckett play. He was on these little rooms, and he had one person is here, and he's over here. And John had this absolutely pristine little section, and Jeffrey over there with all this stuff, and hoarding things, and drove everybody crazy. But he kept doing his artwork because the more he was enclosed in this place, his imagination became very fertile. And by the time he left, I think on his new works, I had over 400 pieces of art. And that's not talking 400, over 400. And that's not counting all the other things he did in the past, which we have, my son and I have to, Leo have to, inventory. And he constantly, and of course, I was terrible, because he was always making clothing for me. And every time I went to the Kennedy Center, it was 2 dresses. It's for the State Department and the White House. And it's like, what are you going to wear? And I'm going to do this. And he comes, and I have to stand there and being fitted all the time. And I hated being fitted. But I would always have 2 dresses. And that was his passion, is to clothing. His father was like that with his mother, and his brother was like with his wife. So Jeffrey was the same way with me. And they were all kind of art pieces, really, the dresses. They were all very special, and they were one of a kind. But he never stopped. He said, I have so many ideas in my head. And he knew, I guess he was leaving or something, because he kept trying to do things. And literally, I wish you would read my son's letter about his father's leaving, because Jeffrey literally choreographed his way to heaven. Literally, he choreographed it. And so it was really extraordinary, very moving letter, that letter. Did you read it? Leo's letter. But that was Jeffrey, that was his way. And he was a strength, and he was responsible. I mean, I don't know any husband who let their wife go traveling all over the place and give that kind of freedom, And I was the same way with him. He says, I feel like going to Paris, I just want to be alone. Go. Of course, he'd come back with all kind of nice things for me. A new dress or something like that.
That's what you're wearing.
Yeah. And so, it's that kind of relationship, because we were each other's companions and encourage each other, and best friends, and loving, and every kind of thing. And it was really, there's only one like that. There's only one, and no way of explaining it, but he was an extraordinary person.
We've reached the end of our time, but I just have one maybe last question for you, Carmen, which is, after 6 decades of making work, of creating, of dancing, of writing even, at the end of your show, hopefully it's not a spoiler alert, you talk about living your life for art. And I wonder what that means for you now, if maybe you can just tell us a little bit.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Well, the world's different, so it means there are other things you can catch on. It's like young people now. I'm really fascinated in the movement that the street kids are doing, and their narrative. It's amazing. I mean, they're extraordinary. They're coming up with some of the most extraordinary pieces I've ever seen. And they're changing the world. They're changing dance. It's already now in the dance world. They're part of the dance world. You see now, and now they're even more complicated. They're bringing it's not just dance steps. They're bringing their life into their work. I don't know if you saw the Crumpers, but they're in a whole other. That's a whole other thing. That's a possession. That doesn't belong on the stage. Doesn't belong on the stage. That's a whole another story. But I think that the young people are bringing their life stories to their work, which is quite fascinating, physically. But that's the dance world. Now, one, and then I'll let you go. I just I heard some the singers, Reverend Forbes singer. Anyway, there was these young people came on, and Reverend Forbes said, the children have some new thing in church now. It's mime. And I said, what is it? And these young people came on stage, and they were all very dark, so they put the white on, and they become abstract like Picasso paintings. It was incredible. And they did this whole thing with this music. God didn't bring you here to let you down, or something like that. And these young people did this whole narrative, this mime about life. in those faces. And I tell you, it was the most beautiful thing. And this is something they brought. I didn't say choreographer. They must have put it together themselves. And it was absolutely riveting. So you see there, now I'm interested in all that now. and that's beautiful. So you'll keep going. I mean, don't stop.
Right.
Why?
Right, right. So thank you to all of these amazing. Thank you so much.